Welcome to another video in this series of Better Riding. Today we're going to look at bike maintenance and not just how it impacts on safety, but also how it affects the enjoyment of riding your bike. Let's get into it.
So Giles, from a riding perspective, what's the number one priority when looking after your bike?
I think tyres would be number one. Tyre pressure, tyre wear, and maybe the sort of tyre that you've got on your bike. And sometimes we fall into the trap of picking the wrong tyre. Let's look at tyre pressure. On a bike, 3 or 4 PSI will make a world of difference to the handling. Maybe we'll talk about underinflated and overinflated. You won't get that in so much in other vehicles, but on a bike, you know, the thing to it, I know it's a cliche about the tyre is the only bit that's contacting you to the floor. But when you think about the very dynamics of a bike, that it leans, and you know, other vehicles don't really do that, do they? Your bike is quite unique in that it is leaning round a corner, and it requires the shape of the tyre to make that a nice linear feel. The pressure you put in your tyre is going to be massive on that feeling in the bike, and if you haven't got that right, then everything else will go wrong, and it's the only bit that's sticking you to the floor. So checking your tyre pressure weekly is super important, I think. My job, you know, from time to time I'll jump on a press bike. Who's been on it before? I don't know. When were the tyre pressures last checked? I don't know. Am I going to just assume that they're okay? No, I'm going to check them. So I've got a van, I've got a foot pump, tyre pressure gauge, and the first thing I'll do if I get onto something like a press bike would be check the tyre pressure, because I'm about to ride it down the road. Are they correct?
So I've seen tyre pressures in my bike's manual, but you don't always have your manual with you. Where else can you find the ideal tyre pressures?
Online. In a nutshell, you can fire up a search engine and you'll find the correct tyre pressures for your bike. On your mobile phone, do it in seconds.
And what happens if you get it wrong? What happens if the tyre pressures are too high?
So too high is quite an interesting one. For me, it's a feeling of numbness. And I think the thing where a high pressure tyre can catch you out is it has a nice shape and nothing feels that wrong. But what you won't have is that squidgy grip in your tyre. Your tyre's now like a balloon and it's overinflated and there's no give in it. So on a hot sunny day and you pick the gas up on the roundabout as you're leaving, you don't have that flex and squidge and grip in the tyre. It's very, very firm on the road. But you don't notice that coming until it bites. That's the deception for me of an overinflated tyre.
And what about the other way? What about when they're too low?
So that one I think you will feel straight away. And that's where, you know, again, you're sort of turning into a roundabout and the bike doesn't want to turn. And really, the reason why it doesn't want to turn is because it's not keeping its shape and it's not rolling nicely on the floor. That shape is collapsing and you're trying to turn your bike and it doesn't want to know. So I can feel that within seconds of moving off my first turn, and you think, oh God, I'm really having to ask the bike to steer here and it doesn't want to do it. Check your tyre pressure straight away.
And how do we know what kind of tyre to buy for your bike?
That's a really good question. And I think that many riders get drawn into, I've got a sports bike, I must put the sportiest tyre on my sports bike. And actually they're doing their own legs because that tyre may not work very well for them. A very sporty tyre may have very little tread. It might have quite a narrow sort of window of temperature, if you like, and it probably works beautifully in that sort of 15 degrees above temperature. There'll be many riders that are riding all year, and in those sort of autumn, winter, very early spring months, they're on something very sporty that's just not working very well. So look at your riding. When do you ride your bike? What conditions do you ride your bike in? And pick the right tyre for that. And it could be that for a lot of us, a sports touring tyre has got broader temperature range, it's got a better tread, it's better for, if you get caught out in the rain. So don't get drawn into an ultra sports bike must have ultra sports tyre. It may not be the right tyre for you.
And what about changing your tyres? When do you change your tyres?
So here's a thing. As a coach, I surreptitiously might look at my client's bike and just run my eyes over it when we walk out into the car park and set up ready to go. And the number of times that we might look at somebody's tyres, they are squared off. But the client might say, well, I haven't changed my tyres yet because they're still legal. And that conversation might be, okay, they are still legal, but wow, that must feel horrible because, you might have commuted to work, you might have done a few motorway miles, you've really squared off that lovely profile of your tyre. That would feel horrible because the bike doesn't want to turn. And then when it does turn, it sort of has to get over the knuckle of the squared off and then it will drop into the turn. So for me, I would regularly change my tyres before the legal limit is up, but because I've lost the shape of the tyre. And we all know it when we buy a new set of tyres and we ride away and it's like, oh, this bike feels amazing. We don't feel it sort of fade away, do we? We just notice it when we get on new tyres. So the shape of the tyre is a big thing. It's not just about the legal limit and the tread depth.
There's the difference between legal and safe.
Yeah, definitely.
Great, so tyres are top of the list. What's number 2?
I think brakes. If you don't know what you're doing with your brakes, take it to a professional dealer. I am reasonably competent at bike maintenance, but I would probably not go down the route of changing my brake fluid. On a modern bike, you have got a lot going on. And modern bikes will often have a sort of a junction box, for want of a better word, in the middle of the bike that is linking brakes. It's linked to ABS control. There will be lots of things going on in the bike. You could hide air in there and not get air out. If you don't know what you're doing, take it to a dealer.
Complicated stuff.
It is. And, it goes without saying that anything going wrong with your brakes will be very, very bad. Brake pad wear. Keep an eye on that. Put your torch on your phone. Get yourself over your caliper. Have a look down that disc. You'll see what we often call meat on the pad. So you'll have a backing plate, then you'll have the brake pad material itself. Sometimes that will come with a wear bar running down it, so you can see when the wear bar runs out. So keep an eye on that. Obviously, the thinner that brake pad material gets, then the more heat you might be creating in your brake fluid. Food for thought. And also worthy of conversation would be your levers. The fact that all bikes will come with the ability to adjust your lever. And I, as a coach, would see lots of clients that have never adjusted their brake levers, and they've got quite a clunky touch when they go to their brakes. And one of the reasons why they might have a bit of a clunky touch is because the lever is not right for the size of their hand. If it's too near the bar, they're squeezing it and trapping fingers and it's coming so far back. Maybe they've got small hands and it's a bit of a reach and they're just on the tips of their fingers. This is adjustable, so set your bike up for you and get that nice dexterous touch. So I think that's very important too.
So as a rider, what else can I tell about my brakes when I'm riding?
Warped discs, they do happen. So your disc obviously will be a perfect flat shape. If your disc warps, which often happens when it gets very hot, you'll take that flat disc and you'll just put a bit of a kink in it. The feeling that you'll then get will be a big pulsing in your brake whilst you're braking. And obviously the quicker you go, the more that will turn into quite an abrupt judder. That in turn may well affect the steering, and you might then just get this sort of shake going on if it's very, very bad. So think about that. Spongy brakes, both brakes, you know, we're not just doing a lot of pointing and looking here, rear as well. If there's sponginess in your brakes, why is that? Have you got air in the system at some point? And now when you're trying to compress that fluid, what you're also doing is compressing a lot of air bubbles in the system, and you know, the brakes just aren't what they used to be, and it's now very spongy. So warped discs, maybe a little bit of air in your system that has somehow got in there.
But if you've noticed a problem, expert eyes.
Definitely. I cannot stress that enough. If you don't know what you're doing, don't mess with your brakes. Take it to a professional.
We've spoken a lot about feel when we're riding in this discussion. What else might you be able to feel?
If your throttle is sticky and it's not returning nicely, that would give you that modulation of speed, that very fine tune of speed. That might be difficult, and it's just all sticky there. So make sure that that is returning nicely on its spring. Head race bearings. Is there a little clunk in the bike when you come off the gas or even go to the brake? Do you feel that little notch there? If you've got a center stand, if you just bring your weight to the back of the bike and you moving your steering, does it settle in the middle where the bearings have worn with lots of motorway use and it's a bit notchy there? Or is there a beautiful linear steering to steering action there? Head race bearings. That's not something I would be doing at home. That would definitely be a dealer job for me. I'm not that competent. Your clutch, you've got a hydraulic clutch here. You're still getting lots of bikes with cable clutches. Is that nice and free? Do I need to put a little bit of lubrication down the cable in its sheath? You know, that pulling off and you're trying to find the biting point and it's difficult to do because this is dry and needs a bit of lube in it. So feeling in that respect, I think, yeah.
So one thing I've noticed about my throttle action is if the chain gets a little bit stretched, it's a little bit too long, then I get a bit of a sort of a snatchy throttle feeling on the bike. Is there anything else we need to look at when in regards to chains?
Yeah, your chain tension, and you've nailed it there, that sometimes when you're in that sort of traffic and you're just picking the drive up and you want that lovely smooth pick up, and it doesn't happen. We're back to exactly what you described, where the chain is probably a bit slack, and that's the feeling of taking up the slack in the chain, and it just gives you that, oh, why's my bike lost its smoothness? Chain tension. Go and examine the back of your bike, and do you need to just bring your wheel back a few turns and just take out that slack in the chain? Definitely.
What if it's too tight?
If it's too tight, you know, that's a maintenance thing. Well, that's a safety thing because you might snap your chain. So your chain might snap. Also, think of the damage you're doing to the sprocket. You're chewing away at that. Think about the drive sprocket, the drive bearings, the strain you're putting on that. So if your chain is too tight, then I think that's a maintenance thing where you're going to spoil your bike and you might run the risk of it snapping. Let's talk about lubricating your chain. You know, your chain can get little tight spots in it. Each link can get a little bit stiff if you leave it outside under a tarpaulin. You know, the rust that can attack a steel chain overnight when it's raining sometimes. If you're looking after your chain and you're regularly cleaning it and lubricating it, then that's an important thing. And again, for me, you know, once a week, I'd put my bike on a paddock stand or on its center stand, and I'd get some chain cleaner out. And it doesn't take 5 minutes just to, it's a bit of a dirty job, but I would just clean the chain, get an old scrubbing brush from the sink, and get all that gunk off it, re-lube it with a lube of your choice. Look after your chain in that respect as well.
And what other tips have you got for bike maintenance we can do ourselves?
Clean your bike. If you're cleaning your bike once a week, it is amazing how you can, oh, look at that. I didn't notice that. Oh, the amount of times that I clean my bike and you think, how is this nut? How is this bolt? How is this oil weep? How are my fork seals? So clean your bike, and by getting into it up close, that's when you'll just be able to keep half an eye on the condition of your bike. That's when you'll notice your tyres are squaring off and all of that sort of stuff. Clean your bike once a week.
So we've spoken a lot about leaving certain jobs to the experts. What's your approach to professional servicing on your bikes?
I'm a professional coach. I'm no professional mechanic. There'll be plenty of things on my bike that I don't know. I certainly can think of times where I've taken a bike in for a service, and when I go and pick it up, they said, "Oh, we had to do this," and I didn't know that. So yeah, once a year, take your bike for its annual service and get it done professionally. I think that's super important. Very quickly on that. The rhetoric with MOTs often amongst us is a sort of a grumpiness that we've got to get it done. See it as a good thing. See the idea that the MOT is a safety net. And again, it's the idea that somebody professional is casting their eye over your bike and making sure that it is safe, roadworthy, and that when you go out there, you have the confidence that you're riding a bike and you're not having to worry about, things that could be going wrong with it. For me, if the bike is well maintained and I know it's in tip-top condition, it frees up my brain to concentrate on riding a bike on a public road. And there's enough going on there. The last thing I want is the distraction of, oh God, my throttle's really sticky. And that's niggling away in my brain. Oh, I can feel that the chain is loose and it's slapping every time I pick up the gas, and it's niggling away in my brain. I hate that feeling of distraction. And I've got a brain that works like that. I want to concentrate on that in front. If my bike is sorted and it's in good shape, then that frees up my brain to concentrate on what's going on in front of me. Well, I hope you enjoyed that video on bike maintenance, and I hope you found it useful. Join us again next time when we'll look at another aspect of biking technique.